Good morning, Crystal. Crystal, can you hear me? I see you're muted.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I don't really know. I really cannot say, but I really don't know. These chats are taking something out of me. They're giving and taking at the exact same time. And I'm feeling some kind of way about everything that I know and I'm learning, through these chats. And almost every last one of them, I learn something. But I kind of feel like I'm having parts of my heart carved up as I hear them, because I'm sure you know exactly what I'm
Well, thank you for doing them. I think it's a great way to process everything that's going on right now with Black people in America and with the pandemic. And I've watched a few of them. It's been great to kind of just get to know people who are in my community who I don't get a chance to sit down and talk to. So thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. I am more than happy to do them. I just think that my intent when I started doing these was to have a voice from people who are down here in the trenches, where all the politicians and bestseller authors and all those people who are talking about this are talking from a framework that's not my lens. I mean, it's not the way I see the world. So that's what I was hoping, that people share their stories, and whether we agree with them or not, at least their voices are heard. And we can understand how people think about what they think about, how white people think about race and white privilege and all of these constructs that we have, and why they're surprised now. Why haven't they been surprised since 1619, or when the indigenous people were dislocated? Why weren't they surprised now? Why is it now? So, okay, I'm done with my soapbox. Okay, so we start by saying good morning, and you telling us your name and anything you want to share with us to help us get to know you a little bit better. So, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Crystal Grant, and I teach and supervise law students in the Duke Children's Law Clinic. This will be my third year at Duke with the clinic. I moved here from Michigan, where I have spent mostly all of my career as a disability rights attorney. I specialize in special education law, so representing children with disabilities who need accommodations in school. And since I've been here at the clinic, we've also done public benefits law. So if families need help appealing Social Security decisions or food stamp decisions, we can help with that, and also school discipline. And I'm a lawyer and a social worker, so I think that's a little unique.
Can you share a little bit about your education? Where did you get your social work degree, and just your path to Duke as much as you can?
Sure. So for law school, I went to Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan. And for my social work degree, I went to the University of Michigan. So two rival schools, kind of like, Duke and UNC. So I'm a Spartan and a Wolverine. And I grew up middle school and high school in Michigan, but for elementary school, I went to school in Jamaica. So my family, I was born in the States, but my family are Jamaican immigrants. And I spent about 6 years in Jamaica. And a lot of my extended family are still in Jamaica. I have family all over the world, Canada, the UK. And so it's interesting to hear everyone's different perspectives of what's happening in the US. So yeah, that's me. Prior to Duke, I have a husband and two children, a daughter, Kaya, she's 7, and my son, Preston, is 3.
How did you end up at Duke? Why did you come to work for Duke? What was the incentive for you to come to Duke?
Right. Well, prior to Duke, I was teaching. I had just completed my first year teaching at the University of Michigan, and I was a fellow in their pediatric advocacy clinic. And so prior to that, my job as a public interest attorney took me all over the state. I was doing 1-week hearings 4 hours away from home, and having little kids, that was just really hard to juggle. So I was looking for something that would allow me to keep doing public interest work, but just have a more manageable schedule. So I took this fellowship at the University of Michigan that kind of trains practicing attorneys to be clinical law professors. And so I took the position not knowing if I would like it, but just wanting to make a shift and try something new. Ended up loving it. It was perfect mixture of a balance of doing my public interest work and also now interacting with law students who are encountering these legal issues for the very first time, seeing the light turn on, seeing the aha moment, challenging them on how they think about some of these issues. It was just great. But you know, it was a training position, so I knew I would eventually leave unless they had a position open up. And so we saw a position on, someone forwarded me a position on a listserv. Brenda Berlin, who was at the Children's Law Clinic before I was a supervising attorney, was leaving. And so I applied for her position, and I came down here for my interview. That was the first time I ever came to North Carolina. Mm-hmm. I love it. I loved it, despite it was a week that, you know, all that yellow stuff is over everything.
Yeah, pollen.
The pollen was over everything. I have never seen pollen like that, but I guess it's pollen, but it's so thick. It is over everything. You can see it floating in the air. I'm like, what in the world is this? But I had just left like ice and white snow covering everything in Michigan. So I was like, I think I'll be able to manage. But I've loved it. Everybody at Duke has been great. The South is not what I thought it would be. You know, when you tell people in the North you're moving down South, if it's, you know, depending on where you're going or you're talking to people who've never been here, people have put a lot of images in my mind. And so it hasn't been what I thought it was.
Keep living. You'll figure out the South is still the South.
Right.
A lot of things have changed about the South, but the South is still the South. You know, they're not holding on to their history as much as they used to, but there are pockets of North Carolina. Be careful if you're going there. And, you know, I'm sure you've heard the term sundown towns. You know, there are some places, and this is probably true across the entire United States, but in the South it's more that, you know, there are certain places that if you're Black or brown and you're out after dark, you might not make it home. No one will ever know what happened to you, you know. So, you know, and the other side I'll add to you about the South is humid. We are incredibly humid, you know, so, you know, the temperature, like I chatted with someone who lives in Arizona, and she was talking about, you know, it being like a dry heat. And, but when it rains there, it becomes very humid. So you got 115 degrees with humidity. I can't imagine what that must feel like. Well, here, you know, we get in our 90s. Every once in a while we skirt by 100, but there's always humidity almost every day. So, you know, it's not like, you know, it's just hot. It's hot and sticky, you know, at the same time. So that's great to know. And I'm very happy to hear you say that you found, you know, comfort and community at Duke Law, because I will tell you, a lot of people that do not have that experience. So it's great that you're there. I'm very happy that Duke is bringing in more Black and brown faculty. That's really, really great for me, because I've struggled with what that means. And, you know, my relationship to Balsa has been, you know, like, I can't tell you how many jobs I've been offered in my years at Duke, but my relationship to Balsa has been what sustains me every day, because what I'm going through, they're going through. You know, the struggles that I have, they have, you know. And so although I'm a staff and administrator, I am Black and, you know, feeling isolated, alone, attacked, and all the other things that go around with that. So I'm glad that that's not your experience, and I hope it stays that way. I hope that you're able to fit. But the clinics, you know, Andrew Foster is a very, very wonderful man, you know, and so he's very, very kind and caring and empathetic, you know. So I think that that's probably one of the reasons why you sense that you don't have a, you know, more larger community, at least, you know, together. But I'm hoping that, you know, with you and Jesse and Michelle and Tim coming to join Trina and Guy and Jim Coleman, that you all find yourself in a community so you can.
We have Thomas Williams, and Gina Gale just joined.
Yeah.
So Nikita. So yeah, we're growing, and that's encouraging. I'd asked when I came, you know, about diversity, because I know Black students tend to go where they see faculty who look like them. Yeah. And so would I see Black students, you know? And what I heard is that, you know, we have pretty white faculty, but there's a commitment to see it, you know, see it grow. And so I've been seeing that in the time that I've been here. Still holding out that we'll get some Hispanic, Latinx faculty and more students, because I think that's a deficit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And even students, Asian students, and, there's just a lot, whew, I don't even want to go there anymore. I'm talking about it. So tell me this. So what about education law inspires you to do the work that you do? What's the piece that gives you, a feeling of accomplishment and achievement?
Right. Well, there's a personal connection. My brother has a disability, and he had special education services when he was in school, and I saw all the struggles my family went through. They were up at the school every day, and it was so stressful for my parents. It was such a strain on our family, and they didn't know the laws and how to advocate for him. And so when I saw a position for a special education attorney with disability rights in Michigan, I started bringing back memories of what my brother went through and how much families need that support. And you don't get it when you're a child. It really changes the trajectory of your life, right? And so I really feel motivated by the difference I'm making, not only in taking on a case and helping a family for a short period of time, but giving them tools, teaching them this is how you play the game, these are the rules, so that when I close a case, I know that they can go forth and continue advocating for their children, and especially the children and the families that we represent in the clinics. They're low-income families, so I just love representing a family who I know would not otherwise have an attorney without our assistance, right? Some of the most egregious violations I've seen have been against families who just have no resources, and no one ever thought that they would find an advocate. I've even seen schools take advantage of parents who have disabilities themselves, right? So students get these evaluations, and it's, to a lot of parents, the average parents, it's like Greek. They don't know what all these legal terms are and clinical terms. And so just sitting down, no one's ever sat down with them in many cases and just gone through the evaluation page by page and just talked about what it means for their child. And so I just feel really satisfied being able to contribute that, and then being able to pass that on to the generation of attorneys who are rising up to say, hey, you may end up going into big law where, all your clients have a lot of education, they know when to come get you, and you are doing maybe transactional work. But here's the other side of access to justice, right? There are this whole community of people who don't have access to a lawyer, don't know their rights, don't know what's happening in their day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. So I have a question, it's really a generic question. What's the correlation between elementary education and wealth equality, or health equality, or what's the correlation from when we start school to when we complete school?
Right. Well, can't tell you what the latest journals are saying and what the numbers are, but we know that the more education people get, the more money they will make over their lifetime, the more likely they are to get another degree, right? So students who can't read in the 3rd grade and who drop out, likelihood that they're going to pick back up their educational career and go to college is pretty slim. And then that correlates to health outcomes. They can't afford, if they don't have a living wage and have a good job, they probably won't have insurance, they won't be getting the health care that they need, they won't be able to afford to eat healthy, so it's all interconnected. We see it in our clinic.
So I think I told you this, or you may know this. My husband's a 3rd grade teacher. He teaches here in Durham. And, I hear the stories when he comes home after working all day, the stresses that he's had all day. And, some of the things that he shares with me is about what happens to Black and brown children in school that are not addressed in a way that says, here's what this means. So for example, uh, in school suspensions, being sent out of the classroom because you haven't complied with what the teacher said you should or should not do, and expulsions, and all of these things without considering what's happening to that child at home, right? So while we're in the middle of this pandemic, we're talking about people putting together lunches and 2 meals a day for students, but in reality, what we're talking about is just that we are at trying our best to educate our children as best we can, but when you have all of these things that disrupt that education, what is it that parents and others should know in order to get to a place where you can advocate for your students, that that you should go see a lawyer, that that this has happened, so we know the obvious things. Child brings a weapon on campus, well, obviously we know where that's going, but I mean, they can't sit still, they're running around, they're fidgety, all kinds of things like that, and end up finding that is a legitimate reason for asking them to leave the classroom because they are disrupting learning for other people. Where is that addressed that in the spectrum of education and law?
Right, right. Well, there's so much going on. You just said a whole lot. Because, one of the things I see um, are the inequities and who gets help, right? And who we view as needing help. So, sometimes I think I've told you before that I've represented young children who maybe they threw a pencil and hit a teacher and now they're being charged with
Right. Oh,
I'm
right.
talking like kindergarten, first grade, right?
Yep.
Or they throw a tantrum and it's considered disorderly conduct and they're being put out for the rest of the school year. So, a lot of times there's this, there's implicit bias at work. And when we don't have educators who look like our children, they may not be as quick to see that maybe I need to just connect with this child, or maybe there are some needs that are disability related or related to something going on in the home. Let me dig a little deeper and not just, characterize this child as a bad child and get them out of the class. That just kicks the ball down the road. It doesn't solve any problems. So that's one thing, like, having educators who are truly willing and able to look beyond the surface. And I know teachers go through so much, and so it's easier said than done. I mean, the job of a teacher is hard, but that's one thing that's going on, and we can't ignore that, right? And then I think, especially in the African American community, there was a time where a lot of Black children were being referred for special education, and it was under the category of cognitive impaired. And so what families heard is that, okay, if they refer my child for special education, they think that my child is not smart, and it's a negative label and it's a stigma. And so I've seen a lot of Black families reject extra help and services. And I think now what I'm seeing is a lot of families who are in class and have means know how to use the system to help their children. They're the ones getting the evaluations and coming to the school to say, this is what my child needs, and advocating for the services. And so it's been my passion to bring those same tools and that knowledge to Black and brown families. And to say, hey, have you thought that your child who can't keep still may have an attention problem? And we talked about that with your pediatrician. If that is a problem, there are accommodations that the teacher can put in place that will help your child. And then the third piece that's not necessarily disability related is the poverty piece. And so, how can we expect children to concentrate and do well if maybe they haven't eaten and maybe there's something going on in the home? And so part of that is having the professionals available in the school setting, the nurses and the social workers, to screen for these issues and then address them. I think that is something that's going to explode when school starts back. We've had all these families who haven't worked and who are under financial distress. We know that the homelessness rate is going to skyrocket probably in the next few weeks. And just the levels of anxiety and depression in children and adults. And so we're going to need these services in our schools, and they were scarce to begin with. And unless there's a big surge of money that goes into the school system soon, it's going to be a problem.
And I don't think there's going to be a big surge of money going into the school system, so, especially the public school systems. So I want to go back to something you said. I want to see if this correlates for you. So when you were talking earlier about, the cognitive piece and the child being labeled as this, do you see how that is a correlation to Black and brown students in predominantly white colleges? And what I mean by that is, it's like, so many times your white peers, and I'm talking about students now, white peers want to know why you're there. How did you get there? Are you smart enough to be there? Why are you there? And when you unpackage all of that, when you kind of dissect that, so is it coming from these fears of being labeled that, for example, if a student has a problem, a Black or a brown student has a problem, their comfort level going to a white faculty or going to someone who may value them or devalue them based on something they didn't get in class, or something they didn't understand. So is there a connection between, what we perceive white people thinking of us if we show weakness or vulnerability versus what's real?
There's a connection. I mean, there are a lot of stories that show it's real. And then sometimes just hearing those stories and knowing that it's possible, I think as a Black student, you have that in your head. So I had many years ago when I was in law school, I had that experience. I'm the first attorney in my family, the first person I know who went to law school. And so I really didn't understand how law school works. And my entire first year, I didn't know you're supposed to just be going to office hours, regardless of whether or not you have a question, just to get to know, your professors and have that relationship. And so my second year, I said, okay, I know now, so I'm going to go to office hours. And the very first time I went to office hours, the professor was a white male. And I went, and I can't remember if I asked a question or what, but I think I did ask a question. His response to me was, well, what were your 1L grades? Because, law school is not for everybody.
Right.
And I never went to office hours again after that. And hearing from everyone else just how much, they're from my white peers, like how, they're connecting with these professors and stuff. I was just like, interesting. And so you do realize that, again, the implicit bias is there. There are people who don't think you should be here and you have to prove it to them. But that's not everyone. But I think once you have a negative experience like that, you're looking for it, right? Because I did see how that experience impacted me. When I started working, I was nervous about going to people and saying what I don't know, what I need help with, because I didn't want that judgment. Oh, they're going to think I shouldn't be here. They're going to think I'm not smart. And I got over it eventually. But it's real. When I hear students talk about it, I know where that is coming from. And I think having more students of color will, we know that connecting with groups who you don't traditionally connect with helps to break down those barriers. That's one of the cures for implicit bias. But I hope that we can get to a point where there's so many students of color that students aren't going to be asking, why are you here? Because it's not an unusual thing, right? And just educating students that that's inappropriate. You don't ask that, right? If you think that, don't let that come out your mouth. And so creating that culture and that environment, I think is going to take time. But yeah, I do think there's a connection, and I think we're hearing the stories more and more. So for so long, I think that's just the way it was, and students even probably got so frustrated that you stopped talking about it. Mm-hmm. I know when it comes to racial justice and implicit bias and stuff, I've worked in places where I just don't talk about it because we reward people who it's a field where we reward people who just go along and make waves. Right. And when you do raise issues and no one listens, you realize, okay, this is not going anywhere, so I'm not going to talk about it. And so we're talking about it now. That's encouraging. I love the way Duke has responded by having the listening session where we've listened to what students are saying, without responding or being defensive, just listening. I think that's so powerful. And so the next step will be to address it and try and change the culture. So I hope that will happen and that we'll all hold each other accountable and 5 years from now, maybe even sooner, we'll look back and say we can see change, that the environment's different.
That's a optimistic view, because I think some of this is like, what do we know? What does our history tell us, right? So what are the stories that, our parents, our experiences have told us about these optimistic times, right? So, when Brown versus Board of Education, we were optimistic that, we were going to be integrated and things were going to be equal and all that stuff. And we didn't find that, right? You got all these amendments, civil rights and voting rights and all of these different things as protections. And as I understand it, we are a protected class, but what are we protected from, and what does that protection look like? So, when you work at an at-will state where they can wake up in the morning and say, well, it was very nice knowing you, get out. We don't want you in here, or you're expendable. We can replace you, within a minute. So there's that part of us that, say, okay, well, I know that's what you're saying, but what I'm seeing and what I hear looks a little different than that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we have to keep sharing the stories, because, I think you said this earlier, like there are a lot of people in this moment who've been surprised. And I've asked myself, do I bear some responsibility for not telling the story and speaking up? I was talking to some of my white friends, and, they were like, have you ever had a story encounter with police? And I'm like, yeah, I've had, I have some stories and people I know and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I've never shared this with them. And I think people being surprised comes from either they're not listening, sometimes you're not listening, or, we just stopped telling the stories because we lost hope.
And
right? So,
and a lot of times people say they're tired of hearing it, right? So you're whining, so I've already heard this already. So why are you still having these conversations? There's I think it's on CNN. I heard a woman say that people ask, why would I have to pay reparations? I didn't own slaves. And it's one of those things that you kind of think about. Okay, did you benefit from your ancestors owning slaves? Did you have a better shot at life because of your ancestors owning slaves? And where does that leave us? Why is there such a gap in education, a gap in wealth, a gap in access? Why are these gaps still here in 2020? Why is it okay to kill a Black man for minor infractions, if it's truly infractions? Why do these things still exist in 2020? I find it fascinating that, they were talking about taking down statues and changing the names of teams that are offensive to certain groups. Did the death of Mr. Floyd cause all of that? What was that what happened? Or is it this combination, the death of Mr. Floyd, COVID, and the people in politics? Is that what's bringing this to light? And then how does that manifest itself into real change?
that question for me, wow. I mean, I think it's everything. Yeah, I think the fact that everyone's kind of at home watching during this pandemic, I think that helps, and that stirred up something in everyone. And just seeing it, the death of Mr. Floyd on TV, like you can't deny it, right? And so happy to see everyone talking about it, because I know in the past, like with Tamir Rice and
Taylor and
Trayvon Martin,
yeah.
like it's devastating to me, right? I see all these faces and I think of my brother, my cousins, my husband, my dad, and so it's like devastating to me. And I've been in a situation where I go to work and I'm like, what do you guys think? Did you guys see the news? And like people just blow over it. Like, yeah, what happened? Oh, some kid got killed. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so, this is different because everybody was forced to look at it and talk about it. And so I'm thankful for that. And, I've been talking about how do we address this in the educational setting, right? And something I shared with some colleagues is, you don't have to have the right words to say, but whatever you do, just don't ignore it, because students in your classes, they're having an emotional reaction, and whether or not they, say it, it's on their minds. And so sometimes just taking a few minutes to recognize what has happened, right? I remember Natalie Holloway, remember that case when she went missing? That's all everyone could talk about, right? Because everybody thought about their daughters and their sisters. She looked like this all-American girl, right? And so in communities of color, this is what's happening to us when we see these faces, and we can't just ignore it. And so it's just been interesting to just see how this response is different. And I hope we continue to be outraged every time something like this happens. And I hope that'll start to decrease, you know, small victories from the protests, but I know there's a long way to go.
I think there's a long way to go. I think one of the things that I have been, researching, I'm writing this book about gender, poverty, and race through the lens of emerging technologies. And what I find interesting are words, like I would not call myself the best wordsmither in the world because my brain works faster than my fingers. So I have lots of spelling errors or left my punctuation out or something. But the all-American girl or boy, what exactly does that mean? The Smithsonian has this thing they call American Color, and it shows like all these things that had happened that had only been in black and white. They're starting to add color to it, so like the civil rights movement and all kinds of other things that have happened, these marches and stuff, they're starting to add color to them. And I hear a lot, about the all-American girl or the all-American boy. And so take that to where we are now, and even to 2016, this man said, make America great again. And my question first, what is an all-American girl or boy? And then when has America been great for black and brown people? So what did I miss in that translation? So all American and make America great. Are those codes for something else? Are they kind of coded words that mean or have a different inflection or a different logic for why they're being used?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, talking about the all-American, I think this is how insidious white supremacy is. Like when we say that term, a lot of people have a certain picture in your head, right? And we've come to this point in our culture and our society where white is the normal. I had to explain to my 7-year-old daughter, like, we're looking for hair products and we're looking for the ethnic section, right?
Right.
So, the white hair products are the normal hair products, and then you have it's not always by like hair type and texture, it's the ethnic section, right? And so we've all been trained to consider that as American. I think it's gonna take so much for that image to change. I love that commercial I saw. Have you seen it? This black guy is walking with his son, and they're walking down the street, and there's a white girl who looks at them in a car, and her mom rolls up the window, and he goes to swimming, and all of a sudden at the end the lens is on him, and he comes to the courtroom, and you don't know, is he the bailiff, the defendant, but he is the judge, right? And stuff like that exposed. That's not what you were thinking, were you? Why is that? And so like it's in so many of us. You have to be intentional to expand your vision and picture of what all-American means. And I think having these images, of all-American being a white person, it has impacted us. It's impacted our the way we think, whether or not we like it, and we have to be conscious to push it back. And so that's what I think about that. And it's going to have to be us as a society that pushes back and redefines all American. And with the Make America Great Again thing, we know that it's been great for some people for a very long time. And as we expand the pie, people aren't going to be happy, and they don't see why it's necessary because that has not been their experience. And so when I think about making America great, okay, let's make it great for everyone. Right. But I'm sure not everybody would define that movement that way. And so this is our time to say, okay, you want to make America great again? We're going to fight for everybody and try and get what we can. We don't know when a moment like this will come again.
Exactly. And I think one of the other components of this is, like we talked a little bit about hiring, diverse faculty. But I think, and you may have read this article. There was an article, I think it was written in 2014. If you want, I'll send it to you. It's about the DNA, the trauma of DNA in our genes, right? So all of these years, so first there's the health piece, right? So, is there a correlation from coming from Africa to America in a boat, in the bottom of a boat in salt water? So is that the logic as to why we are more likely to have hypertension or diabetes? Is there some correlation there? And there's been a lot of, both sides of this. And then you get to the other side of this where you're looking at Black people, and you got people who wrote the book like The Bell Curve, or questioning our intellectual capacity, how smart we can be, or are we smart? And then you take it to the farther side of that is redlining and ghettos and poverty and miseducation and all these things that are happening. And I don't think you can fix one without fixing all, right? You've got to start education, early in education, you've got to start, but then you've got to start looking at all of these things. So if I go get a loan, not the case now, but for many Black people to go get a loan, they're going to get a high interest loan, right? So, they don't read the fine print when they see these things on about, well, come get this credit card because this is a great credit card, right? And you get to the fine print and they're charging 24, 29% interest on purchases, and you don't realize how fast that goes up, right? So the education process has to include some logic about what it means when you step into these areas and how to succeed in it. So in elementary education, we talked about this a little while, you got all the things that happen to young and Black and brown kids in school, and how they're seen by their peers and how they're seen when they go home, right? And I used to tell people this all the time. Black parents put braces on their children's brains because we don't entitle them to challenge us. Whereas white people, they're in the store, Mom, I said I want this, or, I'm going to do this or whatever. And so we don't do that. And I think I may have shared this with you before, but when I was very young, I was raised in a rural part of South Carolina. And I had gone, South Carolina, the part of town I was is a sundowner town, right? So you're not out at night if you're Black, unless you're in your own community, on your own street or something like that. But you're not out and about in the city, right? So I was probably, I don't know, 14, 13. I don't know how old I was, but I had walked downtown. It's probably from the distance from Duke Law to the Bryan Center, if you can imagine that distance. That's how far downtown was from where I lived. So I walked downtown. I had $2. And at that time, that was like a lot of money. I had $2 and I wanted to buy my mother something for Christmas. And, it get dark earlier in the fall. So I had made it down. I bought what I bought. I came back home. I was so excited that I had something to give my mother for Christmas. I'm adopted, so, there's that part too. But I was so excited about this, right? And when I get home, my mother's standing there with her hands on her hips, like, where in the hell have you been? And I told her I had to go downtown and get something. And she says to me, go outside and get a tree, switch, go get a switch. And she went to wailing on me. She beat me and beat me and beat me. And I mean, it seemed like it was hours. It was probably minutes, but it seemed like it was hours. And as I was crying, I was thinking to myself, what in the hell is wrong with this woman? Why is she doing this? What is the issue here? And it wasn't until very recently, and I say when I was in my 40s, that my husband had this conversation with me that changed how I saw that. Because I just think she was just mean and cruel. My husband said she was trying to save your life. She couldn't articulate that. She only had a 4th grade education, but she was trying to save your life, because if you would have been caught in the wrong place at night, you could have been killed. And so as I think about our lives as we are now, we're a sum total of all the things that happened to us all our lives, and they shape who we are and who we become, right? And so being Black, my community means everything to me. And I don't think that we see that across the board among all of us. We see, like, I don't think you can love everybody. I don't think everybody's, one of our Boston students used to say to me all the time, skin folk ain't always kinfolk, so you get that kind of thought process, but we have to try to make repairs within our race and with our brown brothers and sisters in order to actually have a voice that will bring about change, because we don't make up enough of the population to really stomp out racism and white privilege and, you know, all these other constructs that exist out there. But I think with our our brown brothers and sisters and Black people coming together, we have a better chance of changing the narrative. And it's not necessary for you to chastise your child to save his or her life, because you have young kids. My daughter is 41 and my son is 21. And I can't, almost every week I'm having this conversation with you, you know, like, you know, if you get pulled over by the police, hands on the wheels, make sure you have your license and your registration, you know, because I want you to come home, you know. And so for a lot of white people, that's not a conversation they have when they see the blue lights there, because oh my God, I'm gonna get a ticket. I wonder how much this ticket's gonna cost me. For us, when we see the blue lights, am I gonna survive this encounter?
Oh, yeah. That's true. Yeah. I think it's hard as a parent, and you know, my kids are younger, so I really haven't had a lot of that conversation yet. Um, but you know, just looking at the future, I know I will have to, and it's a sad reality that you know they won't have the privilege to do everything that their friends do. Um, and I think Black parents who try and make sure their children are raised to be respectful and all of that, they're trying to do their best to save their children, help them be successful and just stay alive, right? But
Right.
you know, that's where the respectability politics come in. Like sometimes it doesn't matter how respectful you are and you know, or how educated you are. We all, you know, will face the same challenges as Black people in America. So yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow, but
So in the space of children's law, I used to be a guardian ad litem in another career, and I'm sure you know what that is, right? You know what? Yeah. So I was not a lawyer, wasn't legally trained. I was asked to do this by the then mayor of Durham to be a guardian ad litem, and so after went through training, I was like, okay, I think I can do this. And so when you become an advocate for a child, you are, you know, inspecting their entire life. So what's happening to you? Why am I here? Right. And so you'll hear a story of a child who's been abused or neglected, or, you know, crack parents or whatever it is, that these things have happened. So you can tell how long ago, because crack was the thing at that time. Um, I quit for one reason, you know, because I enjoyed the work, but I quit for one reason. It was because there was a very rich white family that I was assigned to, because their 4-year-old daughter had gonorrhea. And the story they were telling, you know, so the healthcare people called, you know, DSS, you know, so somehow or another I was assigned that. And the parents were saying, well, she must have gotten it from sitting on a toilet, or, you know, something like that. Their argument was that, you know, there was no other reason for her to have it other than somewhere she came in contact, you know. And as I started to do my work, and the little girl had 2 or 3 brothers, as I started to do my work, I came to realize that a father was molesting the little girl. And when I wrote up my report, you know, after I'd done all my homework, talked to my supervisor, talked to other ad litems who'd been doing this much longer than I had, you know, my recommendation was that the father be removed from the house, or that the child be taken out of the house, one of those 2 things. And the judge says to me, and I think at that time, I had my undergraduate degree, and one of my undergraduate degrees is psychology, and the other one is literature. He said to me, "You're not educated enough to make this decision." And he took my report and literally tossed it on his desk and hit his gavel. "This case is dismissed." And I left. I could not do that anymore. And I found out later on, you know, from my interactions with talking to people in the community where these people lived, that the father was continuing to molest the child. And so, although I was no longer a guardian ad litem, I went back to my supervisor and I told her, "You guys need to really reinvestigate this again." And she said, "Rochelle, these people have too much money. We're not going to get around this. We aren't, because they have too much money for the justice system to address this in a way. If they're saying this, and they can pay a doctor or something to say that you could get gonorrhea from sitting on a toilet or from some other kind of interaction, but that there was no chance they were going to be able to prove that the father was molesting the child." And, you know, when they finally did something. They found out that, you know, they had made a recommendation that there be more visits to the house. And one of the things was is the father had to be in another part of the house. He couldn't be socially with the whole family, right? So he had to move into another part of the house. And they were wealthy enough. I guess they had a house outside of the house, a shelter or something. I don't know what it was. And they found out that they had cut a hole in the mattress on the bottom side of the mattress that was the size of his body, so he could lay in the bed and the kids would not see him in the house, you know, because when he went to bed, he was underneath the mattress, but they had cut it so that he could still breathe and all that stuff. So cutting out all the material in the mattress so he could be there. And so when I think about racial justice and I think about justice, you know, I always ask the question, people say justice is blind, but is it? Is justice blind? Because so many children out here are getting the short end of the stick because the justice system supposedly is blind, and all of these judges who have these theories and philosophies and whatever it was that they came up with in the law with, and they rule accordingly without actually thinking about the minutia of what's really happening in children's lives. And I think that can be said for adults as well, but specifically for children. So is justice blind?
Yeah, I would say no. I think that's the ideal, but justice sees money, justice sees power, justice sees privilege. And, you know, a lot of people in the system will tell you that, you know, it's not a perfect system. That's, yeah, those are flaws. That's not a surprising story to me, right? Like, we see it in the criminal justice system, we see it in the education system. Yeah, you
No.
know, a lot of young people who, I used to work for a family law judge, and a lot of young people who were referred for whatever violations or crimes, you know, if the family could show that they would provide proper supervision, get the child in counseling, pay restitution for whatever, they could avoid the child being a part of the system, right? And so you get families who don't have money to pay restitution for, you know, whatever the child stole or broke, or they don't have access to the therapist or whatever, and they're going to become a part of the system so that the courts can make sure those things happen, right? So where's the justice and equality in that? And so that always bothered me. That the only thing that was keeping a kid in the system was the fact that their family didn't have money and access to resources. So, you know, justice being blind is ideal. We're not there yet. But we gotta keep fighting for it.
Well, I think the work that you do speaks volumes. I just think they need about 100 million of you in our society to get right some of these issues. Um, we have about 5 minutes. I'm going to give them to you, but I want to tell you something before I do. Do you know Zach Hawkins?
Yes, I've recently met him.
So his three main issues is education, healthcare, and voting rights. And he is looking to make an impact on that. So I really hope that you will reach out to him and talk to him, because I do think his visions are valid. He and I chatted yesterday, and you know, when I heard it again, I've been knowing Zach for a very long time. I used to be the secretary of the Democratic Party, and so back in the day. But you know, I've known Zach for a very long time. He's a very bright young man, very, very, very bright. And I think the causes that he's standing for are so powerful, but he needs help. He really needs help. And I don't mean in a monetary way, but I mean like in guidance and giving him, maybe he needs monetary too. I don't know about that part, but I mean like in guidance and helping him get this framed so that legislatures will increase spending for schools, or will think about having teacher assistants in grades, you know, that, you know, classroom management, you know, where you have one teacher and you got 20, 30 students, and all of these kind of things. So I hope the two of you will connect and think about this. And I have a whole lot of other Black teachers I connect you to too. And, you know, I think it would be really helpful to have those conversations, because I really do think that law may be the thing that tells us how we behave, but it is really what we practice in the classrooms that really challenge or either enhance what our outcomes are.
Yeah. Yeah, I met him recently in a training, and I think he's going to be a great ally. I always say, you know everybody, Rochelle.
I do. Just about been in Durham since 1990, and my what I have done, what most people know me for, is connecting people to each other. So bringing people together, and that's my strongest suit. But you know, like I haven't spent a lot of time with you or Michelle or Nikita, but with Guy and Trina and Jim, I when we were in the building, I tried to at least once a month go sit and talk to them, like trying to understand what they're facing, because my relationship at Duke Law, the strongest relationship I have is with the boss of students, right? That's my strongest relationship. So we feed them, we bring them together, we introduce them and connect them to everybody. I mean, almost every Black judge that we know in North Carolina, we bring before them so they can talk to them, powerful people in our communities, that look like them, because, the guidance, and I'm not a lawyer and I never will to be a lawyer, but I will say the guidance that they need from being in law school, your first and second year, and then to passing the bar, then what, right? So where's that link that makes sure that they successfully navigate what's out there, right? So, law, like every other, just has Black and brown people leave at a higher rate than other areas, but you know and I think it's because there's no link, just keeping them connected to that, right? So I can come back to my alma mater, and all that stuff, but there's still this disconnect somewhere between the time that they leave and then they're practicing law. So that's why I
Right.
know a lot of people, so I can make sure if they have people they can go ask, go talk to this person, she knows about that or he knows about that.
Yeah, I always tell my mentees there's so many job opportunities that are never posted, or if they are, they're for a very short time because they have somebody in mind. And so your ability to network and connect with people will really help you go far in this field of life. So what you're doing is such a valuable service. I mean, I truly hope you understand how important what you are doing is. And I've been to one of your dinners. Thank you so much for inviting me and my husband into your home. And just to see all these people connect with these students, like that's just so powerful. I wish I had something like that when I was in law school. And so I hope you will continue doing it. And you might not get a lot of accolades, and somebody needs to give you an award, because those are the things that I think our students will remember when they look back on their time at Duke. What went well? Oh, Rochelle taking me in and feeding me and introducing me to everyone. The amount of students, if you've been doing that for years, that you have impacted, is just countless. And I admire you and respect you and appreciate you. And what you do challenges all of us to think, what can we do? Okay, so maybe all of us can't cook and throw down like you and invite everyone over, but what else can we be doing to create that sense of community? Because it's a stressful world and a stressful time, and you need to have community that you can go and relax, right? So what does it mean to have people in the building that look like you? I can go down to Jesse's office and say, this happened, and he's like, I know exactly what you mean.
Right,
Or
right,
just relax, and I can not use proper English and know that no one's going to think I'm not educated, right?
right.
And so I think I was talking to someone about code switching, and that takes mental energy, but it's something that we all do to a certain extent.
Right.
Um,
And that's called, when you're doing your code switching and you use proper English, that's called talking white. So you get all these phrases that just thrown at you, like and that's why I think our sense of who we are is so trying, because right, so you and I are Black women, and there's nothing in the whole world that should not prevent us from being allies for each other, nothing. But somehow or another, we find these things that we allow to happen that cause the Black community to dissect itself into segments. So a while ago, there was team light skin versus team dark skin. I was so outraged by that, I almost had a damn stroke. I wrote, like, what the hell is that? Because if you ask your white counterpart, there's no such thing as team light skin and team dark skin. You're Black. That's that one drop rule. So, and to what you were saying, like, so I've been in Duke since 2008. Every Boston student still contacts and communicate. Well, Rochelle, I need this, or can you tell me how to do this, or do you know so and so and so and so, and like so when the class of 2019 was there, when Melanie Walker needed to do her internship, which is absolutely, I mean, Melanie is just so brilliant. I can't even describe it. You know, um, Chief Justice Beasley at that time was just a justice. She wasn't a chief justice, and so, she and I have a pretty close relationships. I picked up the phone and I called her and I said, hey, I have a student who's looking for an intern. She had met Melanie at my house a few times, so she knew who she was. And Melanie went to work with her while Allison Duncan was still practicing, was still an attorney. Another Black student needed, and I wrote to her, and she wrote to her entire list and said, hey, I've got the student who's looking for an internship. And none of this is my job. I'm a technology manager. I have nothing to do with this, but because my connections are so strong, I'm able to help where I can. And I think your point, is very valid. I think that, and Yi probably could tell you this better than I can. Like, there's a lot expected of you, and you may find yourself being the only port in storm for these Black and brown students at the school, because they don't know where to go, because trust is such a big issue, and you don't feel like you're getting the support you need. You don't feel like you're finding community. And I think that that's what you guys bring now. And I hope and pray that the faculty becomes more diverse, as you said, a Latinx person or a Native American or Indigenous person, all of these things, because if you want these kids to come to your school, they got to find resources that help them and help them get through, and so we've got all these great departments, but how far down in the trenches do they go? So that's your job now, so you get to take over that part. But I'm very glad that you are there. It is a beautiful blessing to have you and Michelle and Nikita and Tim it's just a beautiful blessing. And I hope the students find safety in knowing that you're there, that when something happens to them, knowing that you're there. And I don't know if you've talked to Trina a lot, but she could probably tell you some stories too. I mean, like, she and Guy have probably been the weight bearers for a lot of things that happen to Black and brown students. So, I think that they probably can offer a lot that may help you, as you go along your process. So my fingers are crossed, and I am somewhat optimistic that you will make change.
The marathon continues.
The marathon continues. It's not a sprint, right? Yep. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it very much, Crystal, and I will talk again. And do you need me to connect you to Zach, or you know how to connect to Zach?
I do. I think I'm on an email chain with him right now, so I will reach out. Thank you for that reminder. And it's time to get ready for fall.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you going to teach online or in the building?
So I will be teaching the seminar portion of the clinic online. But for students who aren't in Durham and who need to meet for supervision in person, I'll probably have 1 or 2 days in the building, or I'll probably have the clinic space available for a couple days a week for students who want to come in and do their work in the building. I don't know how long that will last. The numbers are going up, so I don't know. Some people say definitely will never shut down again for economic reasons, but if things get bad enough, we might have to shut down again. So I just don't know what to expect. And we'll be prepared to keep doing work, whether it's remotely or in person. We'll just keep going. I thought it worked out pretty well for us in the spring when we had to do the switch, because we already have like client records online and everything like that. And so we won't get to see people face to face, which isn't ideal, but we can still do good legal work.
Absolutely. And, we are here. Academic Technologies is here to help whatever you may need as you're going along the way. So please reach out. And if I can help individually, I'm here too.
All right.
Thank you so much for having this chat with me. It's very, very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Have a great weekend.
You do the same. Bye.